I'm 88 years old. Most mornings now, the house is quiet enough that I can hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen, even though I'm sitting in my chair by the window. That sound wasn't always there. Or maybe it was, and I just never noticed because there was always something else filling the space. Voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing, arguments that never quite finished, conversations that never quite started. At 88, you have a lot of time to sit with things you once kept moving past. You don't rush anymore, not because you've become wise, but because your body won't let you. And when the body slows down, the mind doesn't always follow. It wanders. It goes back. It replays moments you didn't think were important enough to remember. I'm not telling this because I want sympathy. I'm past that stage. I'm telling it because silence has a way of following you into old age if you don't deal with it earlier. And once it's here, it doesn't leave. I didn't grow up in a loud house. My parents weren't cruel. They weren't especially warm either. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about schedules, bills, chores, the weather. If something hurt, you handled it quietly. If something made you angry, you swallowed it. That was just how things were done. No one called it emotional restraint back then. It was just being decent. So when I became an adult, I carried that with me without questioning it. I thought silence was maturity. I thought keeping things to myself was strength. I thought speaking up was unnecessary unless something was truly wrong, and even then, you waited until it passed. In my 20s, I worked long hours. Not because I loved the job, but because it felt responsible. I got married young. We were both decent people trying to do what we thought was right. We paid the bills on time. We showed up to family gatherings. We nodded through disagreements instead of arguing. People said we were solid, stable, low drama. What they didn't see was how much went unsaid. If my wife was upset, I noticed. I always noticed. I just assumed it would fade if I didn't make it worse by poking at it. If I felt disappointed or lonely, I told myself it was temporary. Everyone feels that way sometimes. You don't need to turn everything into a conversation. Years pass easily when you live like that. You don't feel like you're avoiding anything. You feel like you're keeping the peace. In my 30s and 40s, life filled up fast. Children, mortgages, promotions that came with longer hours and quieter dinners. I told myself I was doing it for them. And maybe I was. But I also liked that work gave me an excuse not to talk about things I didn't know how to say. There were moments, small ones. A look on my wife's face when I came home late again. A pause before she answered when I asked how her day was. A sigh that lingered a second too long. I noticed all of it. I just didn't respond to it. I thought acknowledging it would open a door I didn't have time to walk through. My children grew up around that same quiet. I wasn't cold. I hugged them, I provided. I showed up to school events when I could. But I didn't ask the deeper questions. I didn't say the things that felt awkward in my mouth. I assumed they knew I loved them because I was there. Children don't always hear what you think you're saying. The cost didn't arrive all at once. It never does. That's what makes it so easy to ignore. It came in missed conversations, in car rides filled with radio noise instead of talk, in evenings where everyone retreated to separate rooms because it was easier than sitting together not knowing what to say. There was a night I remember clearly, though I didn't think much of it at the time. My wife stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, looking tired in a way sleep wouldn't fix. She said, "We don't really talk anymore." I laughed a little and said, "We talk all the time." She didn't argue. She just nodded and went to bed early. I stayed up watching television, annoyed for reasons I couldn't explain. That was silence doing its work. By the time I reached my 50s, the shape of my life was mostly set. The routines were familiar, the roles were clear. Changing anything felt unnecessary, even risky. I told myself this was just what long marriages looked like. Quiet companionship, shared responsibilities, no surprises. What I didn't realize was that quiet companionship can turn into quiet distance if you're not careful. My wife got sick in her early 70s. Not suddenly, slowly. Appointments, medications, adjustments. I took care of what needed to be done. I drove her. I organized paperwork. I made sure things ran smoothly. What I didn't do was ask her what she was afraid of. I didn't ask what she needed from me beyond logistics. I didn't tell her how scared I was of losing her. I thought staying calm would help. I thought being steady was enough. She passed away on a Tuesday morning, just before sunrise. I was holding her hand. The room was quiet except for the machines. When it was over, there was nothing left to manage, no task to complete, just a silence that felt different from all the others. In the weeks after, people checked in. They said kind things. They told me she knew I loved her. I nodded and thanked them. But at night, when the house went still, I realized how many conversations I had assumed we would have later. Things I planned to say when there was more time. Apologies that didn't feel urgent enough to voice. Gratitude I expressed through actions, but never through words. You can't go back and explain yourself to someone who's gone. That kind of silence doesn't fade. It settles. My children called more at first, then less. They have their own lives. I don't blame them. But I noticed how careful our conversations were. Polite, surface level. We talked about health, weather, logistics. The same things I'd always talked about. I wanted to say more. I just didn't know how to start at that age without it feeling strange. So I waited. Again. Waiting has been the habit of my life. Now, at 88, most of my days are quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. There's a difference. Peace has warmth in it. This is just absence. I think about how I believed silence kept things intact, how I thought not speaking would prevent damage. What I didn't understand was that silence doesn't preserve relationships. It slowly erodes them, like water seeping into cracks you pretend not to see. The turning point didn't come with drama. No shouting, no final argument. Just a series of realizations that arrived too late to act on. I see now that people don't drift away because of one big mistake. They drift because they don't feel invited into your inner life. Because they stop believing their thoughts and feelings have a place with you. I never meant to push anyone away. I just never pulled them close. There are things I can't fix now. I can't sit at the kitchen table with my wife and tell her I should have listened more. I can't go back to my children's younger years and ask questions I was afraid to ask. I can't recover decades of emotional distance by suddenly speaking up at the end. Time doesn't soften for regret. It just keeps moving. If you're listening to this and you're younger, I don't have instructions for you. I don't know your life. I only know mine. I know that the words you don't say don't disappear. They wait.
And sometimes they wait longer than the people you meant to say them to.
I know that silence feels safe in the moment. It feels controlled. But safety can be its own kind of loss. If something matters to you, say it while the person is still there to hear it. Not perfectly, not eloquently, just honestly. I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm just telling you what mine looks like at the end of it. I have memories. I have photographs. I have proof that I showed up. What I have less of are moments where I let myself be fully known. That's the cost I didn't understand until I was old enough to sit with it. There's still time for me, technically, but not the kind that fixes things. Just the kind that lets you see them clearly. If this meant something to you, sit with it. You don't have to do anything about it today. As for me, I'll keep sitting by this window, listening to the house, learning to live with the silence I built, one quiet moment at a time.